Haha. So here we are. It's another episode of The Journey, Reflections on Success. And today I have my sister friend. This is Kemba Byam. She is. Listen, I tell everybody I'm a, multi-hyphenate because I've embraced this. I don't know if she's embraced it, but she is a multi-hyphenate. She has a certificate in community healing and peace building. She's versed in peer support. She's a sacred leader, co-lead of Global Leadership Village. She is a workshop facilitator, consultant, mediator, and she is manager for social development, finance, and administration with the City of Toronto, with responsibility for CABR, that is the Confronting Anti-Black Racism unit of the City of Toronto. She's also an officiant at ceremonies, and she's daughter, she's friend, poet, artisan, all the things. Welcome, Kemba, to the journey.
Thank you.
So I was a little bit nervous about this one. And it's only because I know you.
Yeah.
And this is the first one of the people I know. And there's like a handful of people in my know group. And you're in the group. And so I was a little bit nervous. I'm like, I want to be protective of you because you're literally like my mirror. So I want to be protective of you because you're in a different kind of space these days and so on. And then also I know that we could talk for hours. And so I'm like, how do I make this meaningful for everybody, not just us, but like whoever will watch this? So that gave me a bit of jitters. And I must admit, I don't have that often, but it's good when I get it because it means I want to do well. So let's see.
Okay, wonderful.
So let's start with the question that is the jarring question for this series is, how do you define success? And then, do you consider yourself successful? So what's your definition?
So my definition of success is about living my vision, being in service. I gathered that you mentioned sacred leaders. My mentor, sister friend as well, Ainania, really supported me in like, what is my vision? And I love to be in service to folks in ways that are healthy for me, in balance. I'm sure we'll get into what that means.
Oh, we will.
What that means.
Yes.
Having good people around me, people like you who I can trust. And so that's kind of the second thing. So being in service to others, having good people around me who I can trust, and laughing. I know when I'm not laughing, and I'm known for my laugh. Things are off kilter. Yeah, off kilter, like in a big way. And I will laugh at some wild things. Something that only a few people know about me is like, I love Trailer Park Boys, the show. And there's a spinoff coming and I'm super excited. So
guilty pleasures.
Right?
So okay. So your definition of success is very much tied to feeling. And experiences and who you experience.
Yes. Yeah.
Do you then say, I'm a successful person? Do you?
I wouldn't say that. I think what I've heard of your other guests as well, and I'm thinking about Amoy specifically well, is that it's a journey, right? So what I deem to be successful for me right now, and I accept this, could change tomorrow. I could wake up tomorrow and be like, you know what? Being an officiant, being a manager, this needs to change. Will it take me a moment to surrender into that?
Hey, the
Maybe.
surrender part.
But right now, in the feeling and the experience I am right now, yes, I feel successful.
Okay, that's fair.
Yes.
I feel like, I said it to the last guest. If we think we have arrived at success, then we've stopped living.
Yes.
So I appreciate your take on success. And as we talk about success, there are things that form or lives.
Mm-hmm.
You
Mm-hmm.
are daughter of immigrants,
I am.
Angela and Wilfred,
Yes.
and they're immigrants from Trinidad and Tobago.
Hey, stand up.
And so, but you were raised in Canada.
Yeah.
And I imagine, because I hear this from my friends who are immigrant kids, that it was a different kind of life because you have kind of a duality of personality. Is that your experience growing up here?
Well, I want to say for me, and I had this conversation with a friend a couple months ago. My parents, I don't think intentionally wanted my brother and I'm also a sister, wanted us to assimilate in a particular way, right? So, for instance, in Trinidad, they didn't have Halloween, but we observed Halloween, right? And I didn't really know that my parents had accents, more so my father, until someone in grade 6 told me. And so it was kind of like I understood what happened at home, this very Trini, politically conscious, Black conscious space was normal, but also outside was normal too, right? So it wasn't jarring in that particular way, but it definitely was different, you know? And I was raised in a household of confidence, clarity, excellence. And although we don't share the same spiritual path, but grounded spiritually as well too, right? People are often surprised when I can sing along to lyrics of the Christian faith.
Yes.
But I grew up in that. Sunday mornings, my mother would be singing because she is a Baptist.
Yes. Yes.
Right.
Yes. And the word excellence is something that comes up for Black folks a lot. And I think it comes up a lot for Black immigrant folks and then their kids.
Yeah.
So, like, I'm sure we'll hear this across the gamut of immigrant families. You better do well. You should do well. You know, was that kind of the ingraining as well? Like,
it was so subliminal. And I think my brother and I always did well. Like, you know, there wasn't anything where, you know, we would fail at things. And my parents were very attentive in a particular way. So I wouldn't ever say, there's some experiences that I know people have had that I didn't have. We were pretty...
You were fortunate.
Fortunate, but what I will say is that we were middle class.
You were middle class, but not middle class.
Yeah, right. So we're working class. We're working class. But I never knew until I had an analysis that we were working class, right? So, and I appreciate that. You know, I really, really appreciate being in a home where, you know, excellence was set. But like, you know, in a subtle, not forced. Yeah, exactly.
Very unique experience you're having.
Very unique. And I also grew up around a time where, you know, politically, in terms of hip hop, that also formed how I felt about growing up as a young Black woman in terms of, you know, what it means to be, you know, Queen Latifah, ladies first, you know, sex positivity that was happening around that time. So I think all of that shaped who I am.
And you're a reader, so you're probably, you know, what's her name? She writes those books, Midnight and stuff. Why can't I remember her name?
I don't remember.
But anyway, but you're in that time and era of identity and identifying.
Yeah. So yeah, when everyone was like in summer, like people would be out doing summer programs, I'd be at home reading.
I can see that.
Yeah.
I can see that. So, in talking about identity, I've heard you mention that because your parents came when they came, you didn't have certain connections like physically, so like grandparents and so on. So how do you like identify woman through mom, through distant grandparents, and how does that shape you?
Yeah, I wasn't really cognizant of like this separation of what it means to have a matrilineal lineage until I was older, because for me, my grandparents were like a phone call, right? And I only saw my grandparents. I saw them, my maternal grandmother when I was 7, and I have one clear memory of that. But everything is kind of like what I heard.
Mm-hmm.
And so I had to kind of do that digging, and I will cling on to aunties like like anything. So that's really, it's about finding community. And because you know I have one brother, also like I consider my sisters people like you, but like chosen in a particular way. So yeah, that's how I identify it. You know?
Okay. Fondest memories growing up in the East Side?
That's a really great question, because my memory is elusive. But for me, I grew up with 3 other friends in East Scarborough, on the east side, and we would just hang out at each other's house. Right? There wasn't any kind of big hangout at the mall kind of thing. So I would say that just, and when I was younger, we had a swimming pool. Hang out at my swimming pool. That wasn't so working class, but yeah.
We'll get there.
Oh God.
Okay.
Yeah.
So as you're growing up, experiencing, you know, being shaped by hip hop, being shaped by all these, you know, occurrences, what was the first dream? What did you want to be when you grew up?
Okay, so I grew up on Law and Order, and I wanted to be a lawyer. And you know, I had to really work through that. You know, when I heard what a lawyer for me was, what I saw on television, but I also had to dig deeper, that I have a keen sense of being committed to justice, and that doesn't have to come through being a lawyer. And I really kind of stopped this dream of being a lawyer when I understood, especially for Black lawyers, the impact of what it means to be a lawyer and all the dysfunction that can come from being a lawyer for the personal. And I was like, you know, even something as simple as if I was a criminal defense lawyer, I'd have to defend people who I knew were guilty. And I'm like, oh, I can't do that.
No, that's not. I'm not feeling that.
I don't lie well. Like, anyone who's seen me lie know that I've lied. Like you are in rare company, because people
you don't have a poker face.
I've learned to have a poker face, but
it's hard.
It's hard.
Yeah. Right? But you were gonna pursue this because you did Law and Society.
I did I did, and I was good at it.
Yeah,
I was good at it, but I applied to criminology at U of T post, and I didn't get in, and I think that was the signal. I was like, oh, you know, I was kind of bummed out about it, but I was also like, am I willing to pursue this enough? And then when I started thinking about it, I was like, oh God, this is a lot for something I may not be happy in. There's a lot of unhappy lawyers, you know? And so I want to fulfill my soul's purpose. And yeah, it doesn't have to be that hard.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, so speaking of soul's purpose, how we met at York.
We did.
And we met in 2 spaces, I would say. I don't remember which one came first. So there was the Women's Center, which is now Women and Trans.
Yeah.
But Women's Center, and there was CHRY Radio.
Yes.
I don't know which one we met at first.
I think CHRY.
But it starts with this multi-hyphenate living. Right?
Yes.
But there's something here, because you're very much gender-based in a lot of the work that you're doing. Whether it is with the city or not, but like in your work, there's a lens on gender. Where did this come from?
I really wish I had an easy answer for that. I think it was a calling in a particular way, because even doing what's the show I used to do at CHRY?
Women's Word.
You know, I had an ego. And I'm sure Neil will probably laugh at this, where I wanted to do a radio show, and I went to him like, oh, I want to do a radio show. And he's like, okay, do you have a show proposal? And I was like,
what is this?
What? Why? Just like, I'm great.
Yeah.
And then a couple months later, there was an opening for me to stand in, and I just did, right? And not really oftentimes knowing what I was doing. And then the Center for Women and Trans People, that position got sent to me like 6 different times. I hadn't looked for it. I had a regular 9 to 5 job. And so I think from a spiritual point, for those who understand that, was called into this work in a particular way. And I also know a lot of things that made sense to me through reading was through Black feminist, womanists, often queer women, about how I need to look at the world, not just for Black women or just for Black people, but for everyone. So it made sense that I would do this work because I was reading about people who clicked in my brain about how to look at the world in a particular way. And even as someone who is not queer, the how to bring people in was important for me. And that goes back to the sense of justice, right? These Black, powerful literary authors, oftentimes, unfortunately, I say unfortunately because it wasn't inclusive for me at that time of like the Caribbean and Canada, but like US writers like Audre Lorde, like Bell Hooks, really was like, this is a new way of thinking for equity and equality. And that spoke to me in a particular way.
Yeah, women's studies as a thing came late.
Yeah.
Right? Like when I was at York, women's studies as a department was very late. I think it happened maybe a couple of years before I got there, and that was 99. So, but it's good that, I tell people all the time, you have to supplement.
Right.
You have to supplement knowledge in the world. Like, it's not going to be in schools. You got to supplement knowledge. And so you did that, and it's brought you to these places.
And I grew up in a matrifocal household, right? So I always had an understanding. There wasn't, I mean, I'm sure if I dug into it, there's probably ways in which patriarchy showed up, but like, I grew up in a matrifocal household and did not see any issues with that in a way, right?
Well, speaking of that, something we contend with is strong Black woman.
Hey.
So there's a positive, and then there's I feel like a pseudo-toxic pressuring element to it. So there's strong Black women in your life, and I want to give you the opportunity to acknowledge them and how they've influenced you. And then I want to talk about how you kind of reject the toxic side of that.
Oh gosh, there's so many of them. So I mean, I mentioned Ainania Ayodele, who is a spiritual activist, author. There's some other titles that are not coming to me right now, but she really has been a North Star for me in terms of understanding the work that I do. Toni Morgan, who is wonderful, and I probably should know exactly the work that she does. She does stuff around data, but we started off doing this group called Medina, looking at hip-hop feminism. And there's so many people that I know that... Medina Collective. Debbie Young, who is a dub poet, also multi-hyphenate in a particular way. Nihal El Hadi, who is brilliant as well. And you know what? I used to stalk you. Let's be transparent about this.
Tell me more about this stalking.
Well, I think, I include you in this group. That's why I mentioned that, because I always need people around me, because there are a lot of times where I didn't feel people who reflected me, who are also going to challenge me. All the Black women that are in my life right now have challenged me and supported me. Oh, and I'd be remiss if I didn't mention my friend Carol,
you try and mention Huggies.
Who's a beautiful psychotherapist, but like will be the quickest Virgo to calm.
Okay, so we were talking about women in your life, and we had gotten to Carol.
So I want to say, because I said my brain is not great, so if I didn't mention you, so shout outs to you, and I love you anyways. But I was saying how I stalked you.
Yes,
that's what I was talking about. Because I I am now on a no new friends tip, because I feel
Same.
like, yeah, there's women that I've invited into my space who I know are having a bar of holding me in a particular way, but also setting the expectation with care. And I try and do that for other people as well, regardless of gender, especially Black folks, because things are rough, you know? Things are rough. Especially the strong Black woman stuff that we're talking about. Women that you think are doing okay are not okay. And I learned that when I was working at the Center for Women and Trans People. I was a peer counselor there. And I know stories about people across the city, right? And I would have other people say, "Oh, this person, they have this, they're this, they're this."
They're great, and you're like,
and I know like their life is falling apart. And so, good reminder for me to never assume what someone is going through. I'm not saying I've never like interacted with someone, been like, ugh. But usually, if someone has, let's say, a negative experience with me or they're disrespecting me, I try to go to the spot of what is happening for them that they would be unkind to me or be unkind to someone else.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I would assume that in acknowledging these strong women, you also can acknowledge that this need to be strong at all times is dangerous.
Very much so.
How do you contend with that?
One of the things I've learned to be, especially in the last couple of years, is honest about the ways in which I am not strong, the ways in which I'm quirky, you know, the ways in which there's been days where I have not been able to get up out of bed in a particular way. But now I know I need to ask for help, right? So I make sure that I have a therapist. I make sure that I'm transparent with friends, which is important because the strong Black woman motif, if you will, is assuming that you don't need help, you don't want help, you're not deserving of help or care. And deservedness is very important too for me. So challenging this idea that I don't deserve things, and also trusting myself to choose what I deserve, to reach out to friends, to reach out to family, to say, I'm not going okay, or I don't want to do this thing. Because there was a lot of times before, I would say 5 years ago, I would do things out of obligation. Man, a scam.
I know that scam. I've lived it.
Right? Feeding ego.
Your ego, other people's ego, all the egos.
Right?
Can't say no.
Right?
Yeah.
So, really speaking to that little girl, that good girl, knowing that there are ways that I can be bad. And I say that in quotes, right? Like, I don't have to be this idea of, Kemba, you are so sweet, or whatever the case may be.
Got it. And so how about you now are in the ranks of the 9 to 5er, sometimes 5 to 10er. Because I don't know, Black people can't just have one job, or we're so creative that we can't be locked in, or we're all wanting to be entrepreneurs, but we gotta pay our bills. I don't know what your motivation is to be in the 9 to 5/5 to 10ers.
Yes.
But I know you're in it.
Yes.
How do you find balance between doing what you need to do for the city of Toronto and doing what you need to do creatively? How does that look?
So I want to first say that the work that I do at the City of Toronto feeds into this justice piece that I have, right? It's very I'm very passionate about it. But I also love to be super creative in ways that does not come from leadership in a particular way, where it's every 2-week paycheck. And I'm one of the few people who understands that I am not an entrepreneur. Like, I really respect people who are gonna go.
You're clear.
I'm clear. I need that check to hit my bank account every 2 weeks.
I'm not of that spirit. You're not of that spirit.
I'm not.
But
there are ways in which I am called to service outside of my 9 to 5 job. And that comes through doing work with the Sacred Leaders Training, that comes to doing peer counseling, facilitating, doing officiant duties, right? And from this perspective of giving back and balance, I can do that in ways that I don't have to be committed to it, right? So, it's not like I'm 9 to 5, 5 to 10 all the time, and I'm working on doing that less.
Oh, look at you.
Yeah.
However, you're not telling the people about like how you make clothes and stuff, and how you make accessories and stuff.
Yeah, so I have a friend who's since passed on, who got me into thrifting in our late teens. And I love to thrift. People see me and think, they're like, oh my gosh, it's so wonderful. I'm like, I got this for $10. This boo-boo for $10 that I just wore a pretty earring. And I actually started sewing after I experienced a loss. And it was a way for me, because I'm a very heady person, for me to be tactile. I'm not like, you and I have talked about this, putting something together, like going to a big box store and putting something together. No, ma'am. So starting the sewing was therapeutic for me, and so as a result, I've been working with my my teacher, Stephanie Avalo and Simone.
Hey, Stephanie.
To sew. So could I sew something by myself right now? No. Does Stephanie support me in designing and creating great pieces? Yes. And part of that was, I didn't have a space at home to sew. I now am moving into that. So I'll be doing a lot more sewing on my own. But even that, all of that, making the earrings, designing and making the clothes, it's just therapy for me, to fuel me to do the 9 to 5 stuff. Yeah.
So how have you tracked all the things that you do? I believe that everything we do are building blocks to where we're going to end up. And so I was tracking kind of your trajectory, and you've been on a path to leadership for quite some time.
Yeah.
Do you know like all the steps that you took?
No. And I'll say this. I have actively resisted leadership for a long time.
I can't,
Right? Like, I was in, for me, a toxic work environment that
I want to talk about that.
Okay, yep. And that the ancestors freed me from in a very beautiful way. And after that, I said, you know what? I don't want to lead people ever again. And I want to say this about me. I have been consistent about this. I've never been about, I need to do this work because it's going to net me a certain amount of money. Because I have an abundance mindset. I've always been provided for. So I went into government, took a very frontline job, and I was happy. I was happy. I mean, things weren't as abundant as I had been used to, but bills were being paid. And I got asked to do leadership, and I was like, okay, it's a small thing. Right?
Yes.
Anyways, all that to say, ever since I really started working, I've always been asked to do leadership things. And, it's really taken a long time just for me to surrender into it, that this is my life's calling in a particular way.
And I know you've watched, so you know that there's a point where you get to ask somebody coming up a question. So I'm going to play the question for you.
Oh, yes!
So this question comes from Kirk Diamond. He was the person I interviewed last. And
Juno Award winner.
So listen to what he has to ask. So what is a question that you would ask my next guest coming up? And what is the advice you have for an up-and-coming artist?
I think the question that I would ask is, are you at peace with the decisions that you have made up until this point? And if so, how do you sustain it, given that the world is changing so much?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay.
And the advice that I would give to...
I love that question. And I loved how Kirk framed it. I don't know him to be calling him his first name like that.
I'll introduce you.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, I'm at peace
Mm-hmm.
because I know that I've been called to be at this place at this particular time. And what's great about me is that I have a very selective memory. So there's probably things that I have regrets for, but I don't remember them. There's probably one decision that I made that if I could go back, I would change it, but I don't have regret about it.
Okay. We might get to that decision.
Will we?
We might.
We might.
We might.
Oh, gosh.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you'll have to ask later.
Yes.
And you'll give advice later as well.
Yeah.
And I won't analyze your response.
Good.
So we're on a journey.
Yes.
And I feel like there've been a couple of detours in your life. And I want to point out Detour 2.
Thank you.
Let's go back around to the job you had for 13 years.
Yes. Ooh.
Where you said you experienced toxicity.
Yes.
It was toxic to you in multiple ways.
Yes.
And you, when you got freed from that job,
yes,
you spent 7 months freelancing.
I did. You know all my business.
I try.
Yes.
What did you learn?
Yes.
What did you feel?
Yes.
Or heal from?
Wow. So, outside of getting over the middle class need to have
a certain income,
or a certain income hitting my bank account 2 weeks, I got to rest. I got to, freelancing at that point really let me know that I could work in a way that was based on how I like to live, right? Like one of the things that I did was I worked for Francis Jeffers for the Canadian
Inventors
Multicultural Inventors Museum.
Yes.
Which was wonderful because I love to learn. I'm not going to hit that. I love to learn. And it was so great interacting with people and also learning about Black inventors in a particular way. And I did some other things, I also got to go to the gym every day. And so I felt there was, if capitalism wasn't present, I felt really relaxed, and it was the starting point of me really looking into what it means to be codependent or freeing myself from codependency. So all the things that I perhaps would regret are connected to my feelings around that I needed to be in relationship to someone because I wasn't enough. Hence codependency. But I am healed.
Okay. I love it. I love that you are healed.
Yeah.
So I've divided your life.
Oh, thank you.
Into two things. Two areas.
Yes.
Service to others.
Yes.
And where you say you are now, which is in service to oneself.
Yeah.
So let's talk about service to others. Sacred leaders, officiant for weddings and other ceremonies, gender-based connections and work, and other things, all the other things that you do for others.
Yeah.
How has sacred leadership helped, shifted you
Yeah.
to do that work as well?
Yeah. So there are tools that I learned through sacred leadership, knowing that there's been a call on my life to be in service. People are called in different ways, right? But what are the tools that I need in particular to make sure that I'm doing it in a good way, right? So sacred leadership allows me to not only have those tools as shared by Anania, but also to have a community of other people, mostly women, mostly Black women, who I can rely on, not just within leadership, but also in everyday life, to continue to do this work well, right? So, for instance, I gotten separated from my previous partner, and two of my sacred sisters took me out for my birthday for a photo shoot, right? Being able to receive that and didn't really understand like the enormity of that until after it happened, is a community that I have through sacred leadership in a particular way. So being in sacred leader is remembering that I have this connection to spirit, and that no matter what I do, I am on the right path, has been important for how I lead. And also to take accountability, right? I am in no way perfect. I do have a fiery personality, and sometimes I have to like take account for that too.
And a part of serving, as we've hinted at multiple times, is your 9 to 5.
Yes.
You are, leading up the the CABR, Confronting Anti-Black Racism, which got a lot of gusto coming out of 2020. And your work continues, obviously. How do you, I want to say, keep going in that work in particular, where there's eyes on you? Like, Kemba is very private. There are eyes on you, eyes on your unit to see what you will produce and so on. And we won't go into what you're going to produce. But how do you?
So I want to say, Anania established that unit, and having and then after that was Anthony Morgan. So having two people who already did the work is important, that foundation, right? And so for me, being clear, right? So being clear that this work is important, the liberation of Black folks is important, but also, this is a constant discussion with myself, setting boundaries around my time and my energy. So for instance, and also what I don't always share with people is that I'm actually a very sensitive person, like super sensitive, right? So for instance, because of some of my work as a peer counselor, there's some, secondary trauma that I can sometimes experience. And so there's a big interview that's very popular right now that involves a Black woman. And I had like so many people say, have you seen this? And I'm off mainstream social media, so I didn't even know it existed. And I started watching it. I started watching maybe the first, I want to say 5 minutes, and I turned it off. I'm like, this is too much right now. So I really guard my peace around things. I guard my energy. I mean, if there are places where I have to go into battle and go into war, I will. But if I don't, I don't. I really don't. And I also, what I shared with my team at the unit a couple months ago is there were so many years that I did things alone. I did things in private, I didn't share, and I'm no longer prepared to do that. So I really call in people, even at work, to say, I need help with this, or I'm going to support you in doing this. I don't do things because I feel like if I don't show someone how to do it and I do it myself, it's going to be done better. And that's been, again, on the codependency.
That's a big thing to let go.
I had to save my life. The codependency thing. If I, felt comfortable sharing with everyone all the things that led me to break free of the codependency, they would understand why it's so important.
Earlier you said, am I gonna get music? So before we go into the other part of you, here's a hint.
Oh boy. And this poem, I for a couple of years worked as a counselor supporting survivors, mainly women of color, survivors of all kinds of violence, like the representative from Dr. Raz talked about. And during that time, I really did not have a lot of healthy relationships, and the type of work that I was, with men. And during that time, the work that was coming out of me was very negative. So this stuff where I'm talking about love and reconciliation was when I started to heal. So if you have a name for this, please. You should always say I when you love, as in I love you. And you shouldn't write love you or love ya if you truly mean it. I mean, I've seen it happen before where people are careless with their love, proclaiming and defaming almost simultaneously, and miraculously we stay around. I use I whenever I can to let people know it is me that is loving, or not some misnomer or intangible dudding I. This came to me when leaving my parents' home one day. I said it firm with intention, as if to reaffirm at retention, as if it may have been the last time that they would hear me say it. So each time I leave, I display it. I say it, firm with intention and clarity. I love you. Because I don't want those words to be the last thing that they hear me say, and it sounds obligatory without meaning something they can hear around the way. Each word has purpose and breathes life into our actions and thoughts, loosening the years of blockage, emotional clots. Emoting that you love someone is the highest form of expressing humanity. The expression of care and or desire through these words can allow so much familiarity. So I extend this. I love you. Thank you very much. Where did you pull that from?
Listen, man. You're on the journey, honey. We do research here. It's when we say we, it's Danae.
Yeah.
It's a one-person team. But yeah.
You know, poetry is a first love of mine, and I started writing poetry again, haikus specifically, because I hate haikus. That was great. I don't remember your question.
So now we're talking about the other part of you.
Yeah.
Being in service to oneself.
Yeah.
You have relationships.
Yes.
Your friendships.
Yes.
Family.
Yes.
Mom Angela, Dad Wilfred, brother Aaron. You are out of a marriage.
I am.
You're back with us single gals.
Yes.
Still looking for the man again, I think, I hope. In different ways, because now you have experience.
Yeah, I would put quotes on looking, but
don't choke.
Sorry.
But now, in service to oneself, how do you find joy? What makes you happy?
Yeah, so that's such a big thing. And I think I alluded to this earlier, like being around good people who I can laugh with, grow with. I really like learning new things. It is, there's so many people, they're like, you ask a lot of questions. I've actually had to quell that because I'm so curious about how people think, about how the world works. I'll think about something and then I'll like go down a rabbit hole. And I just don't always get to share it, because who wants to talk about the fact that, what's that? There's a movie I was watching, and I'll think about it later. Like this particular animal is like the predator of the water world. Anyways, the point is I will go on a tangent on things. So I find joy in really just being around people who are committed to laughing, learning, sharing. And I have like a really ridiculous, silly, side that sometimes people don't get to see because they see me in my role for my 9 to 5, or they see me as an officiant, or they see me as a sacred leader, as a healer in a particular space. And sometimes I say or do things and people are like, what is going on? But I think really not taking things seriously because the world is so serious is the way that I find joy. Yeah.
Okay. So let's jump back to a journey you went on.
Yes.
We'll call it marriage.
Okay.
You're out of it.
Yes.
And I always hear the psychiatrists, psychologists, people say that the partners we get are for healing parts of us.
Yeah.
Was that true for you?
Definitely.
And what can you share that you've healed?
So going back to the codependency piece, and I don't, for the most part, I don't think I speak negatively of my previous husband, because I understand that he was gifted to me for me to like fully heal this part, but not understanding that what do they call it in Christianity, like this equally yoked piece, right? And so there was imbalance there in many areas of our relationship. And also for me, like this pressure to be in relationship at a particular point as a woman, I think came up. And I wanted
biological clock stuff,
not in a social way, not in a physiological way. And you know, people can ask my mother, because I remember when I was like 35, my mom had this conversation about having kids in a particular way, or before 35, because I think I was like, you know, I was never the girl, the woman who was like, I have to get married or I need to get married.
You didn't need the picket fence and all of them things.
No. And I love, like, I mean, I love being in partnership, but the whole idea of like needing to be married and all those things, it was never my bag. Right?
So you've transitioned out of that.
Yeah.
And you're, you know, finding joy.
I am finding joy.
In other ways.
Yeah.
And you are serving and loving serving.
Yeah. Yeah. I think many people understand this. Like, when I am rooted, since I'm rooted in what I've been called to do, it's not necessarily, I don't feel like I have a choice. So if I don't enjoy it, it's just going to be miserable. So even the times when I feel upset with the work that I'm doing, I'm like, I'm so thankful. I'm so thankful that I'm clear in a particular way. Even stress points. You know, when I have stress points, there are people that I can call and say, girl, look at what this
yeah. This is some junk.
This is some junk.
Yes.
So, yeah, it's really knowing that there isn't a staticness, like a solidness on experience, and that even though I feel one particular way in one moment, that I have the ability to shift and change it through my choice.
And in service to oneself, tell me a little bit about abundance mindset.
First of all, I am abundant all the time. And I have always been abundant, even as a young person. And so for me, it's really being open and being practical about what I am co-creating with spirit in a particular way. And things, and I just want to say, I know there are people who have challenges with abundant mindset. So let me not say
and
that.
With spirit versus Jesus.
Yes. versus no spirit, right? Like right. I've come into a lot more atheists lately than I ever have, which is always great. And I create room for that, right? I always tell people that I'm a heathen because I don't, adhere to accepted doctrines around that. It doesn't mean that I don't have faith, right? So because I understand my location and connection to spirit, I make room for people who don't believe in a specific. We don't have to clash in any particular way. It's all love. But the abundance mindset, you know, which again I developed through sacred leadership, allows me to understand that anything is possible for me if I surrender to spirit and actually want it and decide that I deserve it. And that could be so I'm just trying to think about what's the last thing. Okay, like last night, you and I were at an engagement together, and I had a lot of things I was managing, and you showed up and you're like, hey, how can I help? And I was like, can you do this really big thing? And you're like, yeah, right? That for me is abundance in a particular way, because the trajectory of my night might have shifted if I had to take on that item that you had offered. So it comes. Even I just have to surrender and let it come, and things flow to me quite easily.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, we're at a point where you should ask our next guest
Yes.
a question you're curious about. And keep in mind, you don't know who it could be.
Yeah.
Could be creative.
Yeah.
Could be entrepreneurial.
Yes.
Could be a 9-to-5er like us.
Yes.
A question for them.
Yeah.
And then you're going to give advice to a strong Black woman who is watching this, who is on the path to leadership, wants to be in leadership. What advice you have for them? So question first.
Yeah, the question is, how do you get out of your own way? When there are times where you understand that you are the reason why you haven't attained that goal or worked towards that goal, how do you get out of your own way?
Okay. How do you get out of your own way? All right. And advice for a strong Black woman.
I would say understanding the places where you want to be strong and want to lead. And also, this is my number one thing, getting a mentor. Like, that is 100%. And I think I got in trouble for saying this low key one time, but if you need to participate in a process where you have to financially get a mentor, then do that too. You know, I think there's a way in which, especially Black women, are expected to like volunteer and be in service, but like if they have spent all this time honing a particular craft that you want to gain from, like it doesn't have to be millions of dollars, but what is the way that you are going to gift to that person who's imparting all this experience, knowledge, time with you? But the mentor thing is the big piece, right? There's so many beautiful young Black women that I see, and if I wasn't setting clear, healthy boundaries for myself, that I would like be like, okay, come little one, let me just show you what it's like. Let me be this
Your
auntie that I purport to be, you know?
Let me be your fancy auntie.
Yeah. Right. Come on now.
Okay.
Right? So
I
that's
hear
my
you.
advice.
Get a mentor.
Get a mentor. And let me be clear, with love. That's not me.
It's probably not me either.
Not right now. Let me say that.
Yeah, not right now. She has a lot on her plate.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Yes.
Speaking of plate,
Yes.
what's next for Kemba the person?
Kemba the person.
Because we've talked, I have insight, but you know, it's what you wish to share.
Yeah.
Because in putting it in the public realm now, we get to show you this video again. Yeah. And be like, remember when you said,
like how you pulled up that video of my poetry.
Yes.
So wow, I just squeezed my hand in saying that. So I do want to pursue another degree, a master's. You know, you and I have talked about that. And the other thing I want to do, which is equally as important, is like create some sort of business around my art making. So that's what's next. I'm really getting my house in order, both emotionally and literally, to do that kind of work. And that connects to the boundaries, right? So because I have often been in service, I haven't been able to tend to my emotional and physical home. And yeah, that's what's next.
Okay.
Yeah.
And we are very aware
Yes.
that you're continuing
Yes.
your work through Global Leadership Village.
In a particular way, even though GLV doesn't exist right now.
Right. But like the work that you do,
Yes.
sacred leader type work.
Yeah.
It's you guys refer to this work as using ancestral and modern practice to decolonize and to heal. Break that down a little bit.
Yeah.
For when people come in contact with you and Anania, and what does that mean?
Yeah, it means that we have to accept that we are of this world and interacting with people in a particular way. So we are, there's ways we have to show up for our 9 to 5, right? We can't be all ethereal. But knowing that there are traditional practices like prayer, like breath, like meditation. I'm just picking very simple things that guide us to be present in the physical world in a particular way. And there are also ways that we take from our, and I'm gonna say I take from, because I don't want to speak on behalf of Ioneer or anyone else in the community, take from the continent of Africa, and specifically for me, Western Africa, that I know carried my ancestors to where I am now, even through, the transatlantic slave trade. There are things that my mother, for instance, right? Every New Year's Eve at midnight, well, I guess it's New Year's Day at that particular point, we have Black Eyed Peas. Mom, why do we do this? I don't know. Good luck. But we know that like these particular things are what our ancestors did to be in spirit, because they knew it was like an offering in a particular way. Right? So how do we bring that into this particular world, and knowing that we're continuing something that our ancestors have already done to sustain us? So that's what it means for me in this moment.
Okay. Well, I think we have come to the point. I won't say the end.
I know.
Because, as you said, with success, things could change and all kind of things could happen. There could be things you're creating that, may mean I need to talk to you again.
Yeah.
So we've come to a point.
Yes, we have.
And I hope it was a good moment with
It
the
was.
journey people.
It was.
And I hope that, those watching appreciate that success comes in different forms. Like you can't just look out for celebrity and people are doing creative entrepreneurship, all of that. Some of us are hybrid, some of us are a mixed bag, and that's what we had today. So I thank you, Kemba.
Thank you
for taking time to come and sit with me, and I hope that you have continued success on your journey.
Thank you.
Right.